Hi there. Now, if you are a database administrator or a software engineer having to write a lot of SQL queries, you know the ordeal. You first spend a lot of time writing your SQL query, then trying to execute it, but later on you realize that you made a silly mistake while creating the SQL query, so you have to go back to the drawing board and have to rewrite the SQL query and then execute it again. Of course, this is a lot of time consuming affair. What if I told you that now you can harness the power of AI, and instead of having to spend too much time writing the SQL query, you can just use natural language in English and translate that into a full-fledged SQL query that now you can not just analyze, but also run it and get detailed explanation of the results that you get, all with the help of AI. Well, that is what we are going to be accomplishing today. I'm Shivai, and today I'm going to be talking about how we can leverage AI to translate these English based instructions into full fledged SQL queries and execute them. For this particular application, we are going to be using Gibson AI, Langchain, and Nebius AI Studio. We'll be talking more about the entire tech stack and how the application works. But first, let's take a quick look at the demo. So in this scenario, I have this application here. For my example, I am connected to a MySQL database that has information about an e-commerce platform. And here you can see that instead of writing my SQL query, I have a query that I've written in English, in plain English, and I ask that what is the most expensive product that is there so far. Now I'll go ahead and I'll click on generate the SQL query, which will allow me to translate the SQL query into, or that will allow me to translate that English word into a full-fledged SQL query. And here you can see that it's select ID, name, price from product, order by price, and in descending order. Now, if I want, I can also go ahead and execute this query to analyze what will be the result. And here you can see that I get the result as laptop with the price as 1099. And if I want, I can also go ahead and explain the result, like why is it 1099? And I will get an explanation that the most expensive product in the database so far is a laptop, which is priced, and this is what we have recorded. So what you see here is that I didn't have to write or even think about the SQL query. So especially if you think about from someone who comes from a non-technical background, who hasn't studied about databases or who hasn't studied about SQL, now they can also interact with their product's database, where they can just provide whatever query that they want to run for the internal database for that specific use case and generate SQL and also get explanations about these particular results. So this is a great tool for folks who don't want to spend a lot of time writing multiple queries, or even for non-technical folks who don't necessarily come from a database background. So that's great. Now let's understand what's going on behind the scenes first by looking at the diagram. So here, the entire idea is that initially the developer provides their user input, which is English simple language and instruction. And then we have this AI application that will go ahead and convert your natural language into SQL with the help of a large language model. And once it has been converted, you get the SQL query. Now, if you go ahead and execute it, so we are running some background functions, which is essentially running MySQL query, and we're executing that to get the result. And then we have another AI LLM that now analyzes this query result and gives a detailed explanation of that query. So this is great where we have these different LLMs going ahead and helping you to not only translate your English language query to a full-fledged SQL query and then also get detailed explanation. Now, we'll also understand that what are the different moving pieces over here from a tech stack angle, and how you can basically like leverage all of them to build this kind of an application. Then later on, we will also go ahead and go through the code review. So first of all, we are using Nebius AI Studio. So what for those folks who don't know what is Nebius AI Studio, it is a platform which hosts a number of different open source large language models. And you can take a look at the catalog of all of the different models that are there to be offered, including some of the latest ones from OpenAI, like the GPT open source model, which is a 120 billion parameter model. In fact, you can get a list of all of them here, and you can also go ahead and filter them based on, for example, just function calling, or if there is a model that's good for reasoning. In order to get started, you just simply go ahead and sign up and generate an API key. So for that, you can click on the Get API key and give a name to your API key and then go ahead and create that. This will be later used because we are going to be using Nebius AI Studio for our LLM. Apart from this, if you look at the entire tech stack, so we also have Langchain. So for our entire application, we are going to be using Langchain. Langchain is an open source framework for designing and building generative AI applications, and it is one of the most versatile libraries that is out there. Our entire application is written in Python with our UI being Streamlit. So we are using Langchain as a way for being able to get functionalities to connect with our LLM and also for managing structured responses that are being generated. And finally, for our database platform, I'm using Gibson. Now, if you don't know what exactly is Gibson, so essentially you can think of Gibson as your AI powered database engineer. It is a platform where you can leverage AI in order to create full-fledged database schemas, entire models, and with the help of AI. So for example, over here for my use case, I've defined this in the code that this is what my database schema kind of looks like. So I have a total of 6 different tables: category, product category, user, orders, and order items. And then I've also defined the relationships, which means what are going to be the joins and the foreign keys. So here I've also defined all of these relationships. Now, normally as a database administrator or as a software engineer, I'll have to go ahead and write these manual queries in order to be able to like run them. But the great thing is, or I have to manually create the tables. But the great thing about Gibson as a platform is that here you can see that I've gone ahead and just given a query over here that, hey, this is my schema. Now, please go ahead and create the tables as described. And with the help of conversational AI, it not only goes ahead and sets up an entire project for me, right? It also goes ahead and creates all of these tables automatically. It also establishes all of the relationships that I have, including the foreign key relationships that are needed. And I get a full-fledged view of how my application basically looks like. So here is an ER diagram that basically shows me all of the different tables and how all of them are linked to the other tables. All of this magically happening with the help of AI. And once it has created these tables, I can also just go ahead and deploy this. So of course, I have already deployed it. So you can see in the database tab that the query that you saw here when I ran the database connection of the MySQL database that I've deployed, it is deploying that in a cloud hosted environment with the help of Gibson. And this is my URL that is available, the connection string that is available for me to use when designing my application. And here you can see that in the diagrammatic view that what is the entire schema looking like, what are the tables, what are the relationships here. So we have the category, then we have the order, then we have the order item, we have products, we have product category, and finally we have the users. Here you can see these schemas. So all of these different schema definitions for creating the tables are all generated with the help of AI, right? And again, I didn't have to write a single query for myself. So this is why Gibson AI is a wonderful platform, because it allows you to truly create in a matter of a few minutes production grade data models, then deploy them on the Gibson AI cloud. And the great thing now is that once it has gone ahead and created this entire database schema for you, you can very easily get RESTful endpoints that you can now very easily connect them to a front-end facing application with just a few clicks. Here you can see all of the different endpoints that you need for the different tables that you can very easily leverage. And in fact, you get some code snippets as well that allows you to understand. So for example, based on the different models that you have, you get full-fledged schema definition, schemas.py. All of these are generate codes in multiple values. For example, if you're using SQL Alchemy, Pydantic, or both, you can get all of these different functions that you can leverage, code snippets, and of course, the most importantly, the data API. And within Gibson AI Studio, now you can also use the playground where you can write full-fledged SQL queries, run them, and also get your access to the data. And here you can also visualize all of the different records that you have. For example, if I want to look at my user, I have 3 different records. So all of this is happening again thanks to AI. So for example, if I were to say, just a real-time example that if I want to start from scratch, now you do get a few different options where you could also, if I log in and I can show you, so you can start from scratch. You can also connect it to an existing database cluster, or you can also import an existing schema. So what if you wanted to create one from scratch, you can just say, help me create a database for student records with marks. And it goes ahead and not only will help you to formulate a very high level schema design, which you can evaluate and also then interact with it if you want to make some changes to it. Otherwise, it will not only design the schema, it will go ahead and proceed with feeding all the tables, all of the records that you want, and very easily it will help you to generate an entire data model and go ahead and create a step-by-step instruction of like creating the students table, adding a separate module for academic records. And all of this again is being happening with the help of this prompting technique that you can leverage. So that is all about what exactly is the Gibson AI Studio. So in my case, I was able to generate my models and the schema of my application with the help of Gibson AI. So now let's understand the code base here. So for the code base, I have primarily 3 different main files. So the first file that you'll explore is the app.py. So this is my Streamlit application. And here I'm basically importing 2 separate modules. And first we'll go over both of them before going over the final application, which is the Streamlit application. So first let's understand the database file. So that's the database.py. Now in the database py, we are doing 2 main things. One is that we are going to be parsing the connection string. So as you see that in my application here, I am basically passing the connection string for my database. In this case, it is MySQL. So we are using the Python module for PyMySQL, and that's the Python library for MySQL. So here, once we get our connection string, we just parse it to get the username, password, and all of these different details. And then we are able to basically get the database configuration from our session state. And once we have gotten the config, we just go ahead and run this particular function, which is mysql.connect to successfully connect to the database. And finally, we also have another functionality of executing the query. So of course, once we have successfully connected to MySQL, we will simply just go ahead and execute that query that has been generated from the LLM, which you see here in the section for the generated SQL. When you want to execute that query, that's a function that is being called. So it executes the query, it fetches the result, and it gives that or sends that back to the UI. So that's the database query. Now let's also take a look at our AI services. So this is where we have first gone ahead and imported all of the different Langchain components. So the first one is Langchain Nebius, which is the LLM provider that we are using. Then we have the prompts and output parser. So here we have defined our database schema for this particular e-commerce database. So essentially the user can ask any sort of questions about this particular e-commerce database. And then we have the function to get the LLM instance. So in this case, we are using the Qwen 3 14mm parameter model, but we can just easily swap it out and use whatever model of your choice. And we also pass an API key. So of course you have to create an env file. In this case, you can just copy and paste the .env into a full-fledged env and paste your API key. So this will allow us to initialize our Qwen 3 model from Nebius AI Studio. Next, we have a function that allows us to translate natural language into a SQL query. So in this case, we initialize our LLM, And then we give a really good prompt to the model, and we say that you are a MySQL expert. Here is my database schema. So based on this database schema, help me generate a full-fledged MySQL query. So we have also defined it some rules that use the appropriate joins in case you're interacting with select queries that have involvement of multiple tables together. Always ensure that you follow for proper functions and syntax. And then we also give it some example queries. So this is called as few shot prompting. So this allows the LLM to understand that, yeah, this is what is expected response based on the input query from the user in natural language. And finally, once it does that, we create a Langchain chain where we give the prompt, we give the LLM, and we expect the output. And finally, we generate the query with the help of chain.invoke, where we have passed our database schema and our question, which is the natural question that the user asks here in this particular input chat box. So once that is done, we get the SQL query and we finally showcase that query over here, which you can see that's the generated query. So that's where we are showing that particular query. And then finally, we also have a function for explanation of results. So we use another LLM, in this case, the same Qwen 3 LLM, where we essentially are just passing the result, the query results that have been passed, and we are explaining them in a real in plain English. So we are passing the result of the query execution, and we give a concise response of what's basically the explanation of that query, like what is the explanation of the query result that has been done. So here we have passed that, and we just explain that in an easy to understand manner. So for someone who might not understand this tabular format, they can get a verbose explanation of all of things that are happening. So going back to our app.py, we have basically imported all of the functions from these two different modules. Now we just simply set up our entire config. We initialize our session state for persistent storage across multiple app interactions and also for being able to do query history tracking. Then we go ahead and give it a title. And finally, here we have our left-hand sidebar where you can set your Nebius AI key and you can set your connection string for your database. And then finally, we show some markdown examples of queries that you can try to execute. And then we have the input box for our question. Then we have a section where we can generate and see our SQL query. Then once we have done that, you also have the results section where you can see all of the results. And finally, like if you want to add all of this to history, you can also like just easily add all of this results and the explanations that you have gotten. And that's pretty much it. So that's the example. Now, of course, you could also run perhaps like some other examples. So for example, I want to run one of these predefined examples that what are the product categories we have. So let's try to execute this as well. So here we get select ID, name, description from category, and we see that these are the list of all of the different categories that we have. Again, we can run the explanation and very easily just get full-fledged results with explanations without having to write these SQL queries by ourselves. So this allows you to ask questions about your database in plain English, whether you are a software engineer or you're a non-technical person. This as a tool is great. And if you want to basically get started, here is the public open source code for this. We'll be sharing the link for this particular code base in the description. So feel free to explore it and set it up. Very simple. Just clone the repo, go to this particular page, do UV sync for installing all of the required dependencies, create an Nebius AI key, and have your MySQL connection string handy. And that's it. And that's how you can just very easily interact with your database in a very easy English language that can allow you to translate them into full-fledged SQL queries and also execute them. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll be posting a lot more of similar kind of content. Thank you.